Hello, I'm Dr. Heloise Coffey, and in a series of bite-sized videos, I'll be taking a look at some of the world's most famous paintings and painters. In this short video, though, I'd like to touch on one of the most famous and extraordinary events in the short life of one of the world's best-known and best-loved painters. In late December 1888, a short paragraph appeared in the local newspaper of Arles, a town in the south of France, reporting an incident that had taken place on the evening of Sunday the 23rd. It read,
Last Sunday at 11:30 in the evening, a man called Vincent Van Gogh, a painter originally from Holland, went to the local brothel, asked for a woman called Rachel, and gave her his ear, telling her, "Look after this carefully." Then he disappeared, informed of what had happened, and that the actions could only be those of a poor lunatic. The next morning, the police went to the individual's house, where they found him lying in his bed, showing hardly any signs of life. The unfortunate man was urgently admitted to hospital.
Today, of course, Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh is as famous for cutting off his ear as for his pictures of sunflowers. But at the time of the incident, and during his lifetime, he was a largely unknown artist. And when he shot himself in a wheat field in northern France just 2 years later, it's thought that he'd sold just one painting. But let's rewind. What led to this now notorious act of self-mutilation, and what, indeed, brought Van Gogh to the south of France in the first place? Van Gogh arrived in Arles on the 20th of February 1888, full of hope and idealism and a lust for life. He'd come to this small town in Provence to start an artist's colony, a studio of the south. Van Gogh rented a house at 2 Place Lamartine near the centre of the town. This was the Yellow House that was to become famous in his painting of the same name. At first, Van Gogh lived and worked alone, walking long distances with his easel, setting up to paint alongside riverbanks, by bridges, in fields. In the end, only one artist came south to join him, the French painter Paul Gauguin, and Gauguin had taken some persuading by Van Gogh's brother Theo, who even agreed to pay his fare. The artists' commune of just two got off to a good enough start. They worked together, sometimes painting the same subject. Together they frequented cafes and restaurants and the local brothel. But soon the relationship cooled, and it wasn't long before things went seriously wrong. The two painters had very differing views on art. Gauguin painted from the imagination, de tête as he described it, whereas Van Gogh liked to paint what he saw. And there was a serious clash of personalities. Van Gogh was emotional, passionate, needy, traits made worse by his fondness for absinthe. Gauguin, by contrast, was detached, worldly and calculating. Following a blazing row on the night of the 23rd of December, Van Gogh, according to Gauguin, threatened him with a razor. Fearful for his safety, Gauguin took refuge in a hotel. When he returned to the Yellow House next morning, the police were already there. It had, until fairly recently, been generally thought that Van Gogh cut off his earlobe and little more. His mirror image, self-portrait with bandaged ear, painted in the weeks following the incident, show his head swathed in bandages from chin to forehead, suggesting something more severe, but hiding the evidence. A sketch by Felix Ray, the local doctor who attended him, however, has more recently come to light. This strongly suggests that it was almost the entire ear that was removed. But what of the woman who received his extraordinary gift? Van Gogh and Gauguin would take breaks from painting by visiting the local brothel. They both put aside money into a fund for these trips. After severing his ear, Van Gogh washed it, wrapped it in newspaper, and went there, giving it to one of the prostitutes, whose working name was Rachel. She was actually called Gabrielle, who, not surprisingly, fainted when she opened the package. But is it possible to make any sense of Van Gogh's actions? During his time in Arles, Van Gogh had been to bullfights held in the town's magnificent Roman amphitheatre. All of this had left a deep impression on him. He painted Arena at Arles only a matter of weeks before severing his ear. One theory is that Van Gogh was mimicking the tradition of the matador, severing the ear of the vanquished bull and presenting it to a woman in the crowd. In his disturbed mind, did he identify with the bull, seeing himself as a wounded creature, conquered and vanquished by love and life? When Gauguin returned to the Yellow House to find Van Gogh injured and the police in attendance, he telegrammed Theo in Paris with the news. He then fled without saying goodbye, and the two painters never saw each other again. Van Gogh stayed in the hospital for about a week, but over the coming months he suffered from further attacks. He came to accept it as, in his own words, mental or nervous fever. I don't quite know what to say or how to name it. Life in Arles became untenable. Some of the local residents signed a petition to have him evicted and committed. In May 1889, Van Gogh entered an asylum hospital in nearby Saint-Rémy de Provence of his own free will. The Yellow House was sealed off. At Saint-Rémy, Van Gogh had severe psychotic episodes when he ate his own tubes of paint, washing it down with turpentine. But he also had periods of astonishing creativity, producing some of his finest work. It was in Provence that Van Gogh's palette of colours moved away from those of his earlier works, with their muddy tones of greys and browns, to produce canvases ablaze with the intense and brilliant colours for which he is now famed. And his technique evolved during this time. The short directional brushstrokes, the streaks, dabs and dashes, done with a brush thickly loaded with paint, were honed and refined, creating a texture that one critic has described as having the quality of a textile. Even if Van Gogh's dream of a colony for artists in the south had come to nothing, and his cutting off his ear legendary, during his time in Provence he produced over 300 pictures and drawings, many of them now considered masterpieces.